So in this video we're looking at solving quadratic equations by factorising, and I've stolen a worksheet here from Mr. Wells, so thanks Mr. Wells, and this has got all the different kinds of equation that we might want to solve in this particular way. So for example, let's choose one that's already factorised. If we've got x plus 3, x minus 2 equals 0. So if we have a factorised quadratic here, and it's equal to 0, then what we have is this thing here times this thing here equals 0. Now, if two numbers times together equal 0, one of those things must be 0. Okay, think about that. If two numbers times together to equal 0, one of the numbers must be 0. Now, that's only true if you've got 0 as an answer. If you've got two numbers that times together to make 6, there's lots of different options. You could have 1 and 6, you could have 2 and 3, you could have 12 times a half. You've got lots of different options. In fact, you've got infinitely many options. But if two numbers times together to make 0, one of those numbers must be the 0. So we can say x plus 3 equals 0. And the other possibility is x minus 2 equals 0. So let's look at those two options. If x plus 3 equals 0, well, x plus 3 equals 0, that is something plus 3 equals 0. So the something, the x, must be minus 3. So you can think of that as something plus 3 equals 0, or you can think of that as, here's an equation, take away 3 off both sides. But either way, x equals minus 3. If we look at this equation, x minus 2 equals 0, something take away 2 equals 0. Well, in that case, x is going to be 2, isn't it? And that's either add 2 on both sides of the equation, or think of it as something take away 2 equals 0. So if we've already got a factorised equation, we can deal with it like that. What if our equation isn't factorised? Well, in that case, we've got something like this, x squared plus 6x plus 5 equals 0. We've got a quadratic which will factorise. Now, that's a separate question, how we factorise the quadratic expression. But let's assume that we can factorise this. Just quickly, x times x would give us the x squared. Two numbers that times together to make the 5 and add together, two numbers that times together to make the 5 and add together to make the 6. So 5 and 1. 5 and 1 times together to make 5 and add together to make 6. There we go. So now we're in the position we were here. This thing here times this thing here makes 0. So either x plus 5 equals 0 or x plus 1 equals 0. This would tell us that x equals minus 5. This would tell us that x equals minus 1. Okay? What we're finding here is that these equations have two solutions. Just to make sure we're happy with that, when we say what are the solutions to this equation, what I'm saying is I've thought of a number and I'm going to call it x. I square it, I add 6 lots of my number x, and I add 5, and my answer is 0. What was the number? Okay, that's what it means to solve the equation. What number could I put in here instead of an x to mean that this side is equal to this side? So what number can I square, add on 6 lots of that number, and add 5 and get 0? When we solve this, we end up with two answers. With quadratics, this is the first time we've met an equation that gives us two answers. What it means to have two answers is if you start with minus 5 and you substitute it in here, the equation works. If you start with minus 1 and you substitute it in here, the equation works. Okay, there are two possible numbers which will make this equation work. All right, that's what I mean when I say I've got two different solutions. We have to be careful of sneaky quadratics, so I'm looking at something like this, x squared plus 4x equals 0. I can factorise this quadratic. Even though it's a quadratic, it's got an x squared term in it, I can factorise it without having to bother with the double bracket factorising technique. I can just pull an x out the front. So in this case, that number times this number equals 0, so x equals 0, or x plus 4 equals 0, and x plus 4 equals 0 tells us x equals minus 4. So x equals minus 4 or x equals 0. The last one to watch out for is the difference of two squares technique, and that works like this. We know a squared minus b squared is a plus b, a minus b. Now, I'm not going to go into the details of that, but this is a fact that we know, okay? A squared minus b squared equals a plus b times a minus b when we put it in brackets. So if I have a question that looks like this, x squared minus 49 equals 0, well, I can factorise that by saying, well, this is x squared and this is 7 squared. So this is x squared minus 7 squared equals 0. So I can factorise that as x plus 7, x minus 7, And now I've got this thing times this thing equals 0. So x plus 7 equals 0. X minus 7 equals 0. So x plus 7 equals 0 tells me x could be minus 7. And x minus 7 equals 0. X could be a 7. Okay, so those are all the possibilities that you can meet when solving quadratic equations by factorising at higher tier GCSE.